All right, let's dive in. Today, we're going to be checking out GPU partitioning in your home lab.
Sounds fun.
Yeah, and you've actually provided some really great material here, this guide on,
Mhm.
enabling GPU partitioning with these open source tools. And it really seems to focus on like the hardware requirements
Right.
and like hypervisor configurations and all that.
Yeah, getting into the nitty-gritty.
Yeah. So basically, we're talking about making one GPU work like it's multiple GPUs, which I think is
Yeah.
super interesting, especially for anyone with a home lab.
For sure.
Um, but I get it. This stuff can be pretty intimidating for some people.
Yeah, it can be a little daunting when you first look at it. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So hopefully, we can kind of break it down a little bit and
Yeah.
make it a little bit more accessible for people.
Absolutely. That's what we're here for.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely.
I think we should start with the why, like why would you want to do this?
Yeah, that's a great point.
What's the value proposition here?
Exactly.
So imagine you've got a home lab running and you've got multiple VMs going.
Right.
Some are doing 3D rendering, some are doing CAD work.
Yeah.
Maybe some are even doing video encoding, transcoding.
For sure.
And, traditionally, each of those VMs, if they wanted decent graphics performance,
Right.
they'd each need their own dedicated GPU.
Yeah.
And that gets expensive.
Yeah, for sure.
So with GPU partitioning, what we're doing is we're saying, hey, let's just share those resources more
Right.
intelligently.
Yeah, so instead of buying a whole new graphics card
Right.
for each task, you can essentially split the GPU you already have
Yes.
into these little virtual slices.
It's almost like a virtual timeshare for processing power.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Now hold on a second.
Yeah.
Isn't that different from just like passing the entire GPU through to a single VM?
Yes, you're right to bring that up. There is
Okay.
a difference between what we call vGPUs and GPU pass-through. So with a vGPU, what we're doing is we're taking that single physical GPU
Right.
and we're sort of cleverly dividing it up into multiple virtual GPUs.
Okay.
And each of those can operate independently for a different VM.
Okay.
It's all about dynamic sharing of those resources.
Okay, so vGPUs are almost like having multiple mini GPUs
Exactly.
all running on one card.
Yes.
Whereas pass-through is like handing the keys.
Yeah, it's like giving the entire GPU to one VM and saying, this is yours.
Have fun.
Go nuts.
Go nuts. Exactly.
Okay, all right. So in a home lab environment
Yeah.
where you've probably got multiple VMs going that need at least some graphics acceleration,
Right.
it sounds like vGPUs are where it's at.
Yeah, I would say in a home lab environment, vGPUs are much more useful because you can share that GPU among multiple machines.
Gotcha.
Now, I know, there are expensive enterprise solutions out there for doing this,
Right.
like Nvidia GRID.
Yeah. That's not really what we're going to be talking about today.
Yeah, thank goodness for that.
We're going to be looking at the more open source solutions,
Right.
which are going to be much more affordable.
Much more budget friendly.
For your average home lab enthusiast.
Exactly, yeah.
So that's where tools like Proxmox and KVM come in.
Okay, yeah, so let's get into some of these hypervisors.
Sure.
So you mentioned Proxmox VE.
Right.
Now that's known for being very user-friendly.
Yeah, it's known for being very easy to use.
Right.
Especially for beginners, even if you've never used a hypervisor before.
Right.
Proxmox has a really nice web interface
Yeah.
that makes setting up a VM and even doing something like GPU pass-through
Right.
very straightforward.
Yeah, but there's going to be a catch, right?
Well, there is a bit of a catch, yes.
Okay.
vGPU support on Proxmox can be a little bit of a mixed bag.
Okay.
Older Nvidia cards like the 2000 series or earlier
Right.
tend to work pretty well.
Okay.
But if you've got a newer model, you may find that you need that pricey GRID licensing we were trying to avoid.
Right.
So this is why a lot of home lab users will opt for those compatible older Nvidia cards.
Okay.
Or maybe the Quadro series, which kind of strikes a good balance
Yeah.
between cost and performance.
Yeah.
Now, there's another trick up Proxmox's sleeve,
Okay.
and that is support for Intel's iGPU SR-IOV technology.
Okay, wait, so even the integrated graphics
Yeah.
on some of the Intel CPUs can be partitioned now for VMs.
You got it.
Wow, that's amazing.
And this is really good for things that are less demanding. So you're not
Right.
going to run, Crisis on this.
Right.
But if you want to do some light video transcoding,
Yeah.
or you want to do like a virtual desktop infrastructure, VDI, that
Yeah.
kind of stuff,
Oh.
Intel's iGPU with SR-IOV can handle that.
So it's not really about replacing a dedicated GPU.
Right.
It's more about adding another layer of flexibility, maybe.
Absolutely.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, so you can use a combination of Intel iGPU and then maybe pass through
Yeah.
a more powerful dedicated GPU.
Right.
And now you've got kind of a best of both worlds situation
Right.
where you can handle lots of different workloads
Yeah.
across your VMs.
Okay, cool. And then you mentioned KVM.
Yeah, KVM is another popular option, and it's known for its flexibility.
Okay.
It's got really tight integration with a lot of other open source tools,
Okay.
like libvirt and QEMU.
Gotcha.
So it's very powerful.
Yeah. But is it as user-friendly as Proxmox, or is it a bit more hands-on?
Well, that's the trade-off.
Okay.
KVM is incredibly powerful.
Right.
It gives you a lot of control,
Right.
but it does come with a slightly steeper learning curve.
Okay, so for someone just getting started, Proxmox might be easier.
If you're a beginner, I would say Proxmox is probably the way to go.
Okay.
But if you really like to get your hands dirty and tweak settings,
Yeah.
KVM might be more your speed. Because with KVM, you can go in and you can change things like the QEMU settings
Right.
to really fine-tune how your vGPU setup is working.
Gotcha.
It's a little more complex,
Yeah.
but it gives you more control.
Right, so Proxmox for simplicity, KVM for like fine-grained control.
Exactly.
Okay, cool.
Now, there is one other option I just want to mention briefly.
Okay.
It's called XCPM, and it's based on Citrix Zen Server.
Okay.
And it's a good option
Yeah.
if you want to do simple, one-to-one GPU pass-through.
Okay.
But if you want to do vGPU,
Right.
it can require a bit of, workarounds and stuff.
Right, okay.
So it's not quite as popular in the Homelab community.
Gotcha. So mostly Proxmox and KVM for this
For this kind of stuff, yeah.
for this kind of stuff.
Proxmox and KVM are going to be your best bets.
Okay, cool. All right, so we talked about kind of the why,
Yeah.
and we've talked about some of the what in terms of hypervisors.
Right.
Now let's talk about the hardware.
Okay.
This is where it gets exciting, right?
Yeah, the fun part. Yeah.
Choosing the right GPU, because that can really make or break your setup, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, so what are we looking for here?
So when it comes to vGPU and pass-through in a home lab,
Right.
Nvidia GPUs are a popular choice.
Okay.
And you'll want to look at things like the Quadro series.
Right.
Or maybe some of the Consumer 2000 series cards.
Okay, I've heard that those older Quadro cards, like the P1000 or something,
Yeah.
are really popular for like CAD work and 3D rendering in home labs.
Yeah, they're surprisingly affordable. They've got great driver support, and they tend to work really well for this kind of stuff.
But wouldn't a newer card give you better performance though?
You would think so, but remember we were talking earlier about those compatibility issues.
Right.
With some of those newer consumer cards.
Right.
So you might have more horsepower,
Right.
but you might also have more headaches.
Right. Okay. So there's that trade-off there
And-
between raw power and compatibility, I guess.
Yeah, and when it comes to open source solutions, compatibility is key.
Yeah, for sure.
You want to make sure that things are just going to work
Yeah.
without having to jump through too many hoops.
Gotcha.
And don't forget about Intel's integrated GPUs. We were talking about that earlier.
Gotcha.
So from the 7th generation onward, Intel's iGPU SRIOV technology has become surprisingly capable,
Okay.
for those basic VM graphics needs.
Oh.
So it's not going to replace a dedicated GPU,
Right.
but it's another tool in your arsenal.
Right.
Maybe you combine that with a pass-through for a dedicated card,
Right.
and now you can have a really versatile setup.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
All right, so we've talked about, why you might want to do this.
Right.
We've talked about some of the hypervisors.
Yeah.
We've talked about the hardware, the GPUs themselves.
The GPUs.
Now let's actually get into the setup.
Okay, yeah, let's dive into the setup process.
Yeah.
So whether you choose Proxmox or KVM,
Right.
there are going to be some crucial steps that you need to take.
Okay, all right, lay it on me.
All right, so first and foremost,
Okay.
before we even touch our hypervisor settings,
Okay.
we need to make sure that our hardware is compatible.
Okay.
Does the GPU that we've chosen actually support vGPU or pass-through?
Okay, so this is where it can get a little tricky maybe.
This is where things can get a little tricky, yes.
Okay, so not all GPUs are created equal.
That's right.
I imagine there are like lists of compatible cards and stuff.
Yes, Nvidia publishes lists of supported GPUs for vGPU,
Okay.
and you can usually find community-compiled information
Okay.
for pass-through compatibility.
Right.
And, for the most part, when it comes to pass-through, most consumer-grade cards should work.
Right.
But you might need to, utilize some creative workarounds.
Ooh, creative workaround.
Creative workarounds.
What does that mean?
Well, we're talking about things like patching drivers.
Oh, okay.
Utilizing community-developed tools.
Right.
Maybe even flashing custom firmware in some cases.
Okay. All right.
So it's not always as simple as,
Right.
plugging it in and hoping for the best.
Right. So if our listeners are not like super comfortable
Yeah.
tinkering with, their drivers or potentially, voiding a warranty or something,
Yeah.
they might want to stick with the GPUs that are known to be compatible.
Absolutely.
Okay. Gotcha.
Now, regardless of whether you need to use those workarounds or not,
Right.
there is one crucial step
Okay.
that applies to absolutely everybody,
Okay. Hit me.
and that is enabling IOMMU in your system's BIOS.
Now we're getting technical, but I love it.
Yeah, getting a little bit more technical.
Okay. What is IOMMU and why is it important?
So IOMMU stands for Input-Output Memory Management Unit.
Okay.
It's a mouthful,
It is. Yeah.
but it's the magic ingredient
Right.
that allows your hypervisor, whether it's Proxmox or KVM,
To actually control and assign that GPU to a specific virtual machine.
so without IOMMU, the hypervisor can't really...
Without IOMMU, the hypervisor is basically locked out.
Okay.
It can't manage the GPU. It can't do anything with it.
So you're not going to be able to do any partitioning.
You can't partition without IOMMU.
Okay.
It's absolutely essential.
Gotcha.
And this applies to both AMD and Intel systems, by the way.
Okay, cool.
It's not an Intel-only thing.
Right. Okay, so step 1, check for GPU compatibility.
Yes.
Step 2, enable IOMMU in the BIOS.
Enable IOMMU.
Right.
Make sure that's turned on.
Okay, what happens next?
So once we've taken care of those two crucial steps,
Okay.
we can actually move on to configuring our hypervisor.
Okay.
Let's start with Proxmox.
Right, let's do it.
So with Proxmox, you're going to need to install the appropriate drivers for your GPU,
Okay.
and then you're going to need to go into the VM settings and enable GPU pass-through.
This sounds pretty straightforward.
It can be very straightforward.
Yeah.
Now, depending on the GPU that you have,
Yeah.
you may also need to copy the card's ROM.
Okay, what is that?
So the ROM is basically a small piece of firmware that's
Yes.
on the card itself.
Right.
And it contains important information about the GPU.
Oh,
And Proxmox might need that in order to properly pass through the card to the VM.
okay, so it's not always as easy as just clicking a checkbox in Proxmox.
Not always, no.
Okay,
But that's part of the adventure, right?
that's the fun of it.
That's the fun of it.
That's the fun of Homelabbing.
Exactly.
Okay, all right, so what about for those who choose KVM, what's their setup like?
So for KVM users, you're going to be using tools like Virt Manager
Yep.
to actually assign the GPU to the VM.
Okay.
And for those who want to go really deep,
Right.
you can modify the QEMU settings directly,
Huh.
which gives you even finer control over how things work.
So once again, KVM, a little bit more flexibility,
Flexibility, yeah.
but also a little more complexity.
Yeah, you're going to need to know what you're doing. Yeah.
A little
Yeah.
bit more with KVM,
Gotcha.
but it's very powerful.
Cool. Okay, so let's say we've configured our hypervisor.
Right.
The VM can now, see the GPU.
Okay.
What's next?
Now we get to the part that often trips people up.
Okay.
We need to install the correct GPU drivers inside the VM.
Oh, okay. Inside the guest operating system.
Exactly. So whether you're running Windows or Linux in that VM,
Right.
you need to make sure that it has the right drivers.
Right. And I imagine that can be tricky with, especially with Nvidia cards
It can be.
in virtualized environments, right?
Yes, because NVIDIA's consumer drivers often lack the support
Okay.
for these multi-VM environments without GRID.
Right.
So you might have to hunt around a little bit
Oh, yeah.
to find a specific driver version that plays well
Oh, okay.
with virtualization.
Another rabbit hole for our listeners to dive down.
Absolutely. But once those drivers are installed,
Yeah.
we're ready to go.
Okay. The moment of truth. Let's
Yeah.
fire this thing up and see if it works. Time to see if all of our hard work has paid off.
Yeah, we've got to test it out, right?
Absolutely. So you want to make sure that your VM is stable under load.
Right,
You want to make sure that everything is running the way it's supposed to.
right.
And you want to monitor the GPU usage across your VMs.
Okay.
Make sure that those resources are being allocated properly.
So it's not just about getting it to work, it's about making sure it works well.
That's it.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah.
Now, we talked about some of the, quirks of using open source
Yeah.
solutions for this.
Yeah.
Are there other challenges that we might face along the way here?
So there are some challenges,
Okay.
and I think it's important to be aware of those going in.
Yeah, let's be realistic about it.
Let's be realistic, yeah.
Okay, so what are some things our listeners should be prepared for?
Well, one of the biggest pain points,
Okay.
especially with those newer NVIDIA consumer cards,
Right.
is driver limitations.
Okay.
So a lot of those consumer-grade drivers just don't have
That multi-VM support that you would find in something like Nvidia GRAD.
Right, right.
And, we mentioned those workarounds earlier.
Yeah.
But some of those can be a little bit adventurous.
Yeah, a little bit risky, maybe.
A little bit risky.
Okay.
So unless you're really comfortable
Yeah.
tinkering with drivers and potentially voiding your warranty,
Yeah.
it might be best to stick with compatible hardware
Yeah.
or consider some of those older cards we talked about.
Okay.
And the other thing that can be a bit daunting
Yeah.
is the complexity of setting this up.
Okay.
Even with open source tools,
Yeah.
GPU, Passthrough, and vGPU can be a little bit confusing.
It's not the most intuitive process.
But it's not plug and play.
Right. Yeah.
So you need to be patient.
Yeah.
You need to pay attention to detail.
Right.
But the good news is there's a ton of information online.
Right.
There are guides. There are forum discussions. There are helpful communities.
Yeah.
So don't be afraid to lean on those resources. Yeah, the Homelab community is great for that kind of stuff.
Absolutely. They're always willing to help each other out.
Right. And that brings us to, I guess, another challenge,
Yeah.
which is the limited selection of
Yeah.
GPU models that really fully support vGPU
Right.
with these open source solutions.
Yes, and it seems like
Yeah.
the newer these consumer-grade GPUs get, the more they're pushing us towards those proprietary solutions if we want to use them for virtualization.
Yeah, it's a bit of a bummer.
Yeah, it's kind of a catch-22.
Yeah.
We want to embrace open source,
Right.
but sometimes the hardware makes it a little tricky.
Okay, so what's the takeaway here for our listeners
Yeah.
who are, excited to maybe try this out in their own home labs?
I think the takeaway is go in with realistic expectations.
Right.
These open source solutions, Proxmox, KVM,
Yeah.
they're fantastic. They're great for home labs.
Right.
But they do come with their own quirks. They do come with their own limitations.
For sure.
So it's all about weighing the pros and cons
Yeah.
and making an informed decision based on your needs
Right.
and your comfort level.
Right. If you're willing to do the research,
Yeah.
choose the right hardware.
Choose the right hardware.
Yeah.
Do a little bit of, digging on the forums.
Right. Yeah.
You can absolutely build a powerful and cost-effective
Yeah.
GPU partitioning setup in your home lab.
Okay.
And the best part is the open source world is always evolving.
That's true.
So we can hope that, more options and more flexibility is coming down the pipe.
Yeah, for sure.
You never know what's going to happen next.
So that's what makes it fun.
That's what makes it exciting.
Exactly.
Yeah. So even with the challenges, it sounds like GPU partitioning in the home lab is a really worthwhile thing to do.
Totally. Yeah.
It's all about getting the most out of your hardware,
Right.
building a really versatile computing environment.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Now, before we wrap up this part,
Okay.
I want to leave our listeners with something to think about.
All right.
So we've talked about, the current state of things
Yeah.
with GPU partitioning in the home lab,
The challenges, the workarounds.
the challenges, the workarounds.
Right.
But what about the future?
The future.
What could be coming next?
Yeah. What's going to happen down the road?
What new possibilities are out there
Yeah.
as open source virtualization keeps advancing?
That's the exciting part.
Yeah, for sure.
It's hard to say for sure.
Right.
But we can certainly speculate.
Are we going to see broader support for newer GPUs?
Yeah.
Are we going to get more user-friendly tools that make this easier to set up?
That would be great.
Oh, no, I know.
Yeah.
Are we going to get completely new approaches to this
It's possible.
that we haven't even thought of yet?
It's possible.
Yeah, it's so cool.
The future is wide open. It's like, who knows what's going to happen?
You never know.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's going to be an exciting journey.
Yeah, for sure.
That much I can say, for sure.
And as always, we encourage our listeners to,
Yeah.
explore, experiment, share their discoveries.
Share your findings.
Yeah, contribute to the community because
Okay.
that's how we push this stuff forward.
That's how innovation happens.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's all about community.
All right. Well, so that's our deep dive
Okay.
into the world of GPU partitioning in the home lab.
We covered a lot.
We covered a lot.
Yeah.
It's a complicated topic.
It could be a little bit overwhelming at first.
Yeah, but hopefully we,
Yeah.
we shed some light on it.
Hopefully we made it a little bit more accessible.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And, hey, remember,
Okay,
knowledge is
good.
power,
Knowledge is power.
especially when it comes to technology.
Absolutely. The more you know,
Yeah,
the more you can do.
yeah. And the more you can do with your home lab. Exactly. So take this knowledge,
Right.
go forth, experiment,
Yeah.
build something awesome.
Okay, cool. Cool.
Yeah.
Now, I know some of you might be thinking,
Right.
okay, this all sounds really cool,
Yeah.
but like, how does this translate to my projects?
Right. What's the real world impact of this?
What's the real world impact? Exactly.
Yeah.
So let's say, you're a 3D artist.
Okay.
You're working on like, this complex animation project.
Right.
Now, GPU partitioning, this is where it gets really cool.
Yeah.
You can dedicate a VM
Yeah.
with all these like, GPU resources to it
Yeah.
to handle those like crazy renders
Those demanding renders.
while you're simultaneously
Right.
running other VMs for
Okay.
like video editing, software development, whatever.
That's the beauty of it.
So no more like bottlenecks.
No more bottlenecks.
You don't have to wait one thing to finish before you start another.
Exactly. Keep that pipeline flowing.
Yeah, exactly.
Or let's say you're a machine learning enthusiast.
Right.
And you need to train these complex models.
Okay.
You can set up a VM specifically for that purpose.
Okay.
Give it the GPU power it needs
Right.
to crunch those data sets.
Yeah. And you don't have to go out and buy,
Right.
multiple crazy expensive GPUs.
You're just maximizing the value of the hardware you already have.
Exactly.
Well, and let's not forget about gaming.
Oh, yeah.
You could use this for gaming.
Okay.
Imagine you're hosting a virtual LAN party with your friends.
Oh, that'd be cool.
Everybody's got their own VM.
Right.
They've got dedicated GPU resources.
Right.
Everyone's got a smooth, responsive experience.
Yeah, it'd be awesome.
So your Homelab suddenly becomes this virtual entertainment hub.
Right.
It's pretty cool.
It is pretty cool.
Yeah.
Okay, well, as we start to wrap things up here,
Right.
I want to leave you with one final thought.
Okay. What's that?
Don't be afraid to experiment.
Yes. Get out there and tinker.
The open source world is all about,
Yeah.
exploring, tinkering, pushing boundaries.
Freeing things, fixing things.
Figuring stuff out. Yeah, exactly.
That's how you learn.
Exactly. So dive in, get your hands dirty.
Yeah. And who knows? Maybe you'll stumble upon the next big thing
Yeah.
in Homelab GPU partitioning.
You could revolutionize the whole thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's all for this part of our deep dive
Okay, cool.
into GPU partitioning in the Homelab.
It's a lot to take in. I know.
It is.
It's a very like nuanced topic.
It's a lot of moving parts.
There are a lot of moving parts, yeah.
But hopefully we've, given you a good overview
I think so.
what it's involved.
Yeah, for sure.
And, the most important thing is to remember knowledge is power, right?
Absolutely.
So the more you know about this stuff,
Yeah,
the more you can do with your Homelab.
for sure.
So take this information, go experiment, have fun.
Yeah. And don't be afraid to, break things along the way.
Break things, fix things.
That's how you learn.
That's part of the process.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So now I know some of our listeners are probably like,
Yeah.
all right, this sounds great in theory, but like,
But how does this help me?
how does this actually help me with my projects?
Yeah. What are the real world applications of this?
Real world applications. Yeah. Like, give me an example.
Okay, I'll give you an example. Let's say you're a 3D artist
Sure.
and you're working on a really complex animation.
Right.
Now, with GPU partitioning, you can have a VM
Okay.
that's dedicated to handling those crazy renders,
Right.
those really demanding renders,
Right.
while you're simultaneously using other VMs for
Right.
things like video editing or
sure.
software development.
Right. Or whatever else.
Whatever else you need to do.
Right.
So you're not bottlenecked.
No more wait.
You're not sitting there waiting
Yeah, for one thing to finish.
for one thing to finish before you can start the next.
Yeah, exactly.
Or let's say you're into machine learning
Okay.
and you need to train a really complex model.
Right.
You can have a VM that is specifically set up for that
Okay.
with all the GPU power that it needs
Okay.
to crunch those data sets.
Right. And you don't have to go buy like
Okay.
5 different,
You don't need a server room full of GPUs.
yeah, crazy expensive GPUs to do it.
You're maximizing the hardware you already have.
Exactly.
Now, we can't forget about gaming.
Oh, yeah, gaming, of course.
You can use this for gaming, too.
Okay.
Imagine you're hosting a virtual LAN party.
Okay.
Everyone's got their own VM.
Right.
Everyone's got dedicated GPU resources.
That'd be cool.
So everyone's got a smooth, responsive gaming experience.
That would be really cool.
Yeah, so your Homelab becomes this awesome virtual entertainment hub.
Pretty cool.
Pretty cool.
Yeah.
All right, so as we wrap up our deep dive today, I want to leave you with one final thought.
Hit me.
Don't be afraid to experiment.
Yeah. Get out there and tinker.
That's what open source is all about.
Exactly.
It's about exploring, pushing boundaries, trying new things.
Breaking things, fixing things. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's how you learn.
That's how you learn, yeah.
So dive in, get your hands dirty, who knows?
Yeah.
You might discover something amazing.
You might be the next, big GPU partitioning guru.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
So until next time, happy virtualizing.
Yeah, it's really mind-blowing when you think about the potential here.
Right.
It feels like we're just scratching the surface
I think so.
of what GPU partitioning could do for home labs.
Yeah.
It could totally change the way we use our home setups.
Absolutely. And I think as we wrap up here,
Yeah.
it's important to remember that,
Yeah,
knowledge is power,
for sure.
especially with something as complex as this.
Right. It can get pretty complicated.
It can.
So understanding the details,
Yeah.
the potential challenges, the workarounds,
Right.
that's what really gives our listeners the tools to make this tech work for them.
Exactly. It's one thing to hear about the benefits,
Right.
but it's another thing to actually understand how it works.
Right. How to actually implement it.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
And that's where those open source solutions really shine.
Yeah.
Proxmox, KVM.
Yeah.
They give people a way to do this, even if they're on a budget.
Yeah. That's a big deal.
It is.
So if we had to give our listeners just one piece of advice,
Yeah.
what would it be?
Don't be afraid to experiment.
Yes. Tinker. Explore.
That's the heart of open source.
Break things, fix things. That's how you learn.
That's how you learn.
Figure it out.
Yeah, it's all about that continuous learning.
Right. Always be learning.
Yeah.
Dive in. Get
Yeah.
your hands dirty.
Yeah.
You never know what you might discover.
Maybe you'll find a better way to do things.
Yeah. Maybe
Yeah.
you'll be the next,
Yeah.
GPU partitioning expert. Well, that's it for today.
That's it.
Thanks for listening, everybody.
Happy virtualizing.
Oh, what?